On today's broadcast, would you be willing to give your kidney to a perfect stranger? Stay tuned and find out how you might be able to.
Broad topics, broad minds, broad hosts, but not just for broads. This is Broadscast with Kim Goldman and Jackie McDougall.
Today's broadcast is brought to you by Audible.com. You can receive a free month trial as well as a free audio download of a book of your favorite book at audibletrial.com/broadcast. They have like 180,000 titles. I'm sure the book that you love, that you've been wanting to do, and that you've been putting off because it takes time to read a book, you can actually listen to it now.
We're so lazy.
I know, right?
That's
so go
awesome.
to audibletrial.com/broadcast. Hi, Kim.
Hello, Jackie McDougall.
Welcome, everybody, to Broadcast.
Hi, welcome. Glad
Today's
to
a
be here.
really important episode.
Yes, I'm super nervous a little bit.
You are?
I'm a little nervous, yeah, because it's a topic that I don't know too much about, and I'm excited. I'm nervous. I'm a little like, I don't know. It's a sensitive topic.
Well, because we've got so much to cover, we should get into it. But let's break it down real quick for people what to expect in today's show. So there's a mom coming on, Chantal, who's looking for a living donor for her daughter, Thalia, who's 14 years old.
Right.
She will tell her story. But also we have Josh Morrison of waitlist0.org, who not only is he a living donor himself.
That's fantastic.
I know,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
He went from being a corporate lawyer to starting this nonprofit so he can help other people who need specifically kidneys. But, you know, there are a lot of other organs, not a lot, but kidneys and liver and bone marrow. I mean, there are obviously other organs that you could do living donation for. But this specifically, he's worked with Chantal and her daughter, and he is amazing and doing really important work.
All right. Well, why don't we?
Yeah, I love shows like this because when we come into it not really knowing.
I get educated so much.
Yes.
Yeah. That's what the show's about, lady.
Yes.
Yeah.
So we will be right back and we'll get things going.
Hi, this is the Monkey. My parents run the best social media company around. Go to starksocial.com today.
Welcome back to Broadscast with Kim Goldman and Jackie McDougall. So 5 years ago when I was working at the Ricky Lake Show, I don't know if you remember, Kim, but they had that whole, we had this whole social media thing, Friends of Ricky. And
Yep.
It was just like, so I met so many people through that.
Right.
Some of them who have been guests on our show. But one person that we kind of were connected and I've been following her journey is Chantal O'Neill. And she is a kidney disease and organ donation activist, but she hasn't always been. So welcome to the show, Chantal.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
So-
Hello to you both.
Hello. So when we met a long time ago, you were doing a lot of other things, and just in the past year and a half or so, you've become a kidney disease and organ donation activist. How did that come to be?
Well, that came to be, it wasn't planned, but it just fell into my lap with being very concerned about my daughter getting ill so often, and then it being labeled as an autoimmune issue, and then being misdiagnosed. And then finally, after going to a really great hospital, they realized that she had HSP. To that effect, what happened was that her kidney failed.
Right.
And
So
we
just
didn't-
to real quick, HSP is a form of vasculitis, which is the inflammation of blood vessels. And the only reason I know this is because my son also was diagnosed in the past year with HSP. So you and I, that's why I was very surprised. But one of the problems is that your kidney can fail and they check for kidney damage regularly. So she was going through HSP and what happened? How did you find out?
Okay, so she had certain symptoms that was confused for Crohn's disease and other intestinal issues because that's how it presented itself. And I wanted some answers. We went to different doctors, different specialists, and finally it was diagnosed as end-stage renal failure. Usually, if a child has HSP, usually the age is around 11 and younger. So she was also an odd age at 13 to be diagnosed as HSP.
Mm-hmm.
And also, usually the lucky ones actually revert back. It may have a kidney failure, but they give you a 90 window mark where the kidney can start to reboot. And there have been a large percentage of children where the kidneys have rebooted, but it was too late in the game, and so this was our journey. And through that, we were immediately told that she needed dialysis ASAP. So we spent 24 days in the hospital. We bunked together. I made it as comfortable as possible for her. We both have this way of dealing with obstacles in a more realistic sense, without saying why me, but more like what can we do. Proactiveness was just being proactive and also seeing the bright side of every situation. Definitely is a survival mechanism that we definitely adhere to, but it really saved the day, with a dose of sense of humor, of course. But seriously, we really wanted to know what was going on, what was the prognosis, and what did we have to do as parents to make sure that Dahlia, my only daughter, could just function moving forward. And we had great care. And after being violently ill and then misdiagnosed several times, they call it end-stage renal disease, which is abbreviated as ESRD. Thankfully, with the medical team pinpointing it accurately, finally, she was now scheduled to go dialysis. They were still following her, hoping that her kidney would revert back to somewhat of a normal stage. That did not happen after the 90-day mark. So the next phase was to really consider being listed. And as
and when you say being listed, you mean for a kidney donation?
Listed as a prospective organ recipient in New York State, but listed meaning that you're getting a kidney from a deceased donor. And that's what that means, listed. You can't just get listed to be a living donor. Living donors, it's up to you to go out and search for that through friends, families, and people you know. There's no list where, well, there is a list where people can try to find out, but when the hospital says you're listed, they clearly mean that you're on the list to be as a candidate, and usually children are priority.
Mm-hmm.
But if there's a something happened within a year that shifted that change, where I guess if an adult is in a dire need of a kidney, they take precedence, which is fair. I mean, we have to think about the code of ethics as well.
Right. So you're talking about, there's only a list for people who are on to receive organs from deceased donors. There's no, so you're saying there's not really a list, other than if somebody were interested in doing a living donation, they could find people who are in need. But so,
well, there are. Well, just to make sure it's accurate and correct here, there are associations and organizations that try to create a list of altruistic donors out there, and there's not an official website. So just to clarify, but there are people who are trying to either have Facebook pages or committees where they actually offer some kind of help, where people link each other, even other organizations who try to do that. But logistically speaking, under the hospital, there is no such thing as that.
Wow.
Is that unusual, or is that like something that should be happening?
Yeah, it seems like,
it seems like there's a whole disc. There seems like there's like a missed opportunity.
No. Here's what needs to be corrected here. There is the opportunity, which hospitals are very, very, very adamant about, which is the match donor list. Because my daughter is an O positive or an O negative, she can't be in that pool, because, not that she can't be in that pool, but the chances of an O positive being in the pool of kidney match list is odd, because if you are going in a kidney swap, you're looking for one person who's not a match but is willing to donate, who's a sister or a friend, and then they're looking for another donor who maybe is a relative of somebody else, but they can't give to each other. But if they swap, I can give to you because you need this. But an O positive is a universal donor. So they would never sit in a pool, because if they can give to everyone, why would they sit in a pool with a swap?
Right.
Because automatically I can give to whoever's next to the person I do know.
An O donor can still give to an A or a B or an AB or...
It's a universal donor.
Right.
There are some exceptions. There really are some exceptions, and then I could go on and on about that, but there are some exceptions. But let's get to the point of the matter here. Thalia is a young girl who's 14, turned 15, and through Kidney for Thalia on Facebook, I've tried to share the excitement of trying to have everybody rally behind us and save her life by getting a living donor. The wonderful thing that happened, the really wonderful thing that happened, is that we connected with so many other kidney moms, kidney dads, and parents who were fighting the same fight. But in addition to that, a really wonderful thing happened. We met a mom who wanted so badly to be an organ donor for my daughter. She was exactly the poster image of what a doctor would want in terms of criteria. But something happened where, through the test results, she was diagnosed with having something that needed to be removed in her own kidney, which she's so grateful for.
Wow.
Eternally grateful for. And we still keep in touch. She's still rallying for a kidney donor for Thalia. But this wonderful thing happened where, through the course of taking a very intense physical evaluation, she, in return, had an opportunity to discover a phantom disease that could have been discovered 3 to 5 years later, as per the doctors. But it was It was detected very, very early in its very embryonic stage.
Wow,
and,
that's insane.
It was phenomenal, and she wrote a really great story about it, and it touched a lot of people, and we're still raising awareness on Facebook for Kidney for Thalia. And then also people are emailing me at typeokidneydonor@gmail.com, typeokidneydonor@gmail.com to see what they can do.
And we'll include that email on our list. But real quick, Chantal, so what about, people will ask about the living donor versus, the deceased donor. So if because I think a lot of people just assume, okay, well, you could get it when someone passes away. But they're not, you can't compare the two. Like, living donor is much more successful, correct?
Yes, a living donor is much more successful, but there's been plenty of people who've had deceased donor transplantations, and they've done quite well. The difference is that with a living donor, there's more time to test and then get as close as a match as possible. But we've gotten great matches through deceased donor. The problem is that with a living donor, it's just quicker. If you're on the list, which we have been for a year now, for a deceased donor, when you're on the deceased donor list, you're waiting for a good match, which is an optimal kidney. A deceased donor kidney or any organ receives trauma.
Right.
And when there's trauma, they have to analyze whether the trauma is too intense for a child to have in their body, because then the lifespan is too short versus an adult. If there's a 65 or 40-year-old person who's getting kidney and the lifespan of the kidney is just long enough for them to live life, that's awesome. But if there's a child who's got 50 more to 60 more years of life to go, or 70, no matter whatever life will give them, you really want an optimal kidney that'll really, really be a good kidney for that child, so that the child will not have to be transplanted more than 3 times. Because if a child is transplanted, usually they have to get transplanted again in adulthood, because transplanted kidneys don't last forever.
Okay.
There's no determining factors in terms of how long it'll last, but they try to guesstimate, like, at least it should give you 20 years, maybe even 30 years, sometimes 15 years, depending on, what your lifestyle is and how the kidney, the quality of kidney that you were given. So if the lifespan of a kidney, a really good kidney, is 30 years, if a child is 14, that means 44, 45, you probably need another kidney.
Wow.
That harsh reality is something we already know because we our due diligence, did our homework, and really developed a very warm and healthy relationship with the whole team. I recommend this to every parent. Don't make it just about knowing the facts. Really make it a family issue with your medical physicians, anyone involved in your child's team when your child is suffering from a chronic illness to the point where they need to be transplanted. Develop a very, very close relationship with them and ask questions, advocate for your child, and also encourage your child to listen to his or her body. My daughter definitely is her own advocate because she really is now so in tune with her body. She knows when something isn't right. She knows even when something's recommended that she has a right to question it and look for options A, B, and C, which even as adults sometimes we do not do. And it really empowers their child and the parent when you are willing to ask questions, research, do your due diligence, and don't make it about a doom and gloom situation. See how you can help someone else while you're going through this journey, because so many other people want to hear your story because it's their story too.
Is that how you stay so positive, is knowing that you're connected to so many other people?
Absolutely. I mean, we walk into the hospital, there are other pediatric end-stage renal disease patients there, and some are 4, some are 15, some are 17, some are 18, some are 15 like my daughter, and some are 9, and some are 10. And the hospital does a great job making sure it doesn't feel like dialysis for 3 hours, 3.5 hours, or 4 hours right after school. It just makes it feel like they really try to make it feel like, okay, there's a treatment happening, but in that time frame, what can we do to make you feel engaged? Can we form a community? I spearheaded more music, and Child Life really worked with me so that kids are learning how to play instruments, or there's a guitar player who comes in and sings to the kids, and there's craft, and there's so much to just keep you engaged so that it doesn't feel like doom and gloom. The whole concept is life goes on. We still have to persevere and thrive and then forge ahead.
Wow. Well, Chantel, what if one of our listeners or many of our listeners are interested in helping your daughter, what's the first step?
The first step would be to email me at hypokidneydonor@gmail.com, or simply find me at Kidney for Thalia. That would be the first step, to read about her.
And it's THAYLA. I'm sorry, THALYA.
Yes, Kidney for Thalia at THALYA. And then read about, we always post what the criteria are to be a living donor. Number one issue, which will rule you out, is if you have high blood pressure or diabetes. Right. 2 things are just like, you won't even be considered. Another thing is that if you're taking a number of medications, you then that also, because they really want to make sure that, number one thing, that we're not taking someone who's not in the best health and putting them in a position to be at risk. The hospital is very, very stringent about that. They do not want to compromise anyone's health, whether it's a relative, a mother or father. They don't want to. And by the way, we want to clarify, both mom and dad are not qualified candidates. If they were, we would have been the first ones there.
Really? Why is that? Why is that?
Due to minor medical issues. If there's any issue at all, history of cancer, history of family with diabetes or high blood pressure, or anything that would have the doctor say, you are not a candidate, we cannot have you. And also, me being the mom, I'm not a match. Her dad is a match. In terms of blood type.
So you're saying not that all moms and dads can't donate to their children, but that I understand. I understand. I'm sorry.
Oh my gosh, there's been so many.
I misunderstood for a second.
I'm glad you said that, because anybody out there could have misunderstood. So many beautiful stories about moms who gave to their sons or dads who gave to their daughters because they were the perfect blood match. And also, if there's some abnormality in the blood extreme in your blood type, that's also a contributing factor as to why somebody cannot be a donor, because if you have one kidney and you're already struggling with other health issues,
it puts you at risk.
That's not
Right.
Right. Well, we really appreciate your coming on, and we're going to add all of these ways to reach out to you onto our website at broadscast.com. But, whatever we can do to spread the word and to help Thalia, get what she needs, we're in.
Yeah, thank you. And just everybody stay positive, and whatever anyone else is going through, there's just always a bright light at the end of the tunnel. And hopefully I'll get to share websites and links with people so that they can learn a little bit more about the whole process.
Perfect.
Thank you so much, Chantal, for sharing your story. We appreciate it.
So when we come back, Josh Morrison will be here from waitlist0.org, and he'll give us a little bit more information on living organ donation. So
stay tuned at broadscast.com with Jackie McDougall and Kim Goldman.
Broad topics, broad minds, broad hosts, but not just for broads. This is Broadscast with Kim Goldman and Jackie McDougall.
Welcome back to Broadscast. So I think that this is probably one of the most important episodes we've ever done.
You've been wanting to do this for a long time.
I've been wanting to do this for a long time. Yeah. So we have Josh Morrison, co-founder and executive director of Waitlist Zero, on with us today. Welcome, Josh.
Hi, glad to be here.
Thank you so much for joining us. So Waitlist Zero, can you first tell us what is that? What is your organization?
Yeah, Waitlist Zero is a nonprofit devoted to representing living kidney donors and supporting living donation. We want to end the transplant shortage by increasing the amount of people who give kidneys to their friends and family.
And the transplant shortage is pretty huge. I mean, there are 6,000 donations per year. And how many people are on the list? Or am I right?
Yep, no, that's about right. There's about 6,000 living donations each year. And then there's another about 11 or 12,000 deceased donations each year. And there's about 100,000 people on the list. 35,000 get added each year. And there's as many as 80,000 people who could use a transplant but don't even make it to the list. So it's a really important problem.
And that's just kidneys?
Yep, that's just kidneys.
Wow. Oy. And so, it seems like a pretty obvious question, but do you think that there's a lot of confusion people have between, a donor after they've died and a living donor?
No, I think that's a great question. And I do. I think that a lot of people don't even realize they can be a living donor. I think that's one thing. People think that they sign their organ donor cards, which is great and really important. But people think that that's sort of all there is or all that can be done. And then I think some other people think that, if you sign up as an organ donor after death, that means that your organs will be donated when you die. But in reality, most people can't donate after death, and it's only about 0.5% or 1% of all deaths that can become deceased donors. So
Really?
It's important to sign up. Yeah, but it's not sort of enough on its own, or it's not the only thing that people can do.
What are some of the reasons, though, that people can't donate necessarily after they die?
Yeah, well, basically, you need to essentially be brain dead, or at least have sort of cardiac death, and be in this very kind of controlled hospital environment, so that they can, as soon as they can kind of control the process and begin immediately taking out your organs, while sort of still maintaining a lot of your, kind of your heart and different kind of your blood flow and things like that. So just most people just don't die in a way that would be possible. And then of course it's also, there's a little bit of an age limitation, or, if you're, over 75, usually in America, we won't transplant from those patients. From those people.
So full disclosure, when I was putting together my living will and trust, I'm a single mom, and when the section came to whether or not I wanted to donate my organs, I was like, yes, of course, whatever I can do. And then it was explained to me that I would basically be emptied like a canoe. And it freaked me out, to be honest with you. So what can you say to that? I know that we're going to continue to talk about this, but that got me nervous, and I want to. It's on my card. I put, I want to donate on my card. But what do I
throwing a wrench in Josh's plan here?
No, I want to understand how that looks.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of reasons people can feel nervous about becoming a deceased donor. And I think just no one likes thinking about our own death in the first place, right? And then to think about things happening to our body after we die that seem, like what we'd be sort of lesser in a way, or that, they're kind of rooting in there and taking out organs, that can feel scary to people. But the reality is people who donate have, a normal funeral and an open casket and all those sorts of things. And, it really is, on the one hand, it is, I admit that, there can be a sort of an ick factor with it in some ways. But on the other hand, it's a real chance to save. One person can save 8 people's lives by being a donor, and it's and that's just sort of the organs. But there's also a lot of other ways in terms of like tissue donation and things like that that are really essential. It's definitely, I think a lot of people share that feeling, but it's you're going to have a normal funeral. You're going to, your family's going to have the same experience you'd have otherwise, except they'll know at least that, you were able to kind of save someone else's life and sort of live on in your contribution to other people.
Right. Right. So let's go back a little bit to the living donation, because that's really your expertise, right? And so your, Weightless Zero was your brainchild. How did you go? You were a lawyer. You were doing your thing. Like, how did you go from point A to point B?
Yeah, it was definitely, I think, a surprise to people of someone who was a corporate lawyer, giving a kidney to a stranger. And so that was the beginning of the kind of journey. I donated about 4 years ago in 2011. And the joke I make, it was just an amazing experience for me. Like, just the few months before and after were really the happiest time in my life, and that's partly because I had other things going on too. But the thrill of saving someone's life was really incredible. And I joke that my work now is just sort of like chasing that high again.
That's funny.
So I started thinking about donating, personally, a long time ago. It was about 8 years ago, and I first heard about the idea, and I first thought, that might be for me. I read an article about a woman who needed a kidney, and she ended up getting a transplant. But it really struck a chord with me because there were 3 different people who told her yes, they donate, and then who backed out. Oh. And you could just tell the sort of feelings of loneliness and almost shame about, needing something from someone else and feeling like a burden. And I could just really empathize with that and empathize with, needing someone to save my life and worrying if people liked me enough to do that. So that really got to me. And then also sort of reading that, you get to, as a kidney donor, you get to save someone's life. But the harms to you, the risks to you, they're real. It's not a costless choice, but they're very controllable, and it's much, much, much less than the gains you're giving to someone else. Right. So I thought about that for a while. I ended up donating, and then it just seemed like, as we talked about earlier, there's this huge problem in this country, and it's just a problem I think we're not doing enough about. And it's also something where I think just with a few different policies, we could really end that shortage, which would be just this incredible achievement. And would also, one of the things that's nice about it, I do a lot of political advocacy, and, transplant's this really great area where if you can give people the best care and give them a transplant instead of having them on dialysis, not only does it save their lives, it also saves money, and it actually saves the government money, a lot of money. The government saves about $150,000 for each kidney transplant that takes place.
Wow.
So that's kind of what got me interested in the field. Was it sort of appealed to my nerdy wonky side and appealed to kind of my emotional side of wanting to make a difference and wanting to help people.
But is the hardest part connecting donors to people that are in need, and is it that they don't match? I mean, I honestly have my information comes from Grey's Anatomy, so I'm not really sure how legit that is. But is it
well, as brilliant as Shonda is, Kim?
Come on. I mean, is that the biggest hurdle that you have to overcome? Is just people being willing? Is it? Is it that the blood type doesn't match? I mean, what is it really?
It's it's really more willingness. I mean, it's not like everyone's a match for everyone else, but it's also, it's sort of a little bit harder to be a match than for like blood donation and just like blood type. There's a few other factors besides blood type. But it's not like bone marrow donation where you have to be kind of like the one perfect match to someone. Kidney donation, it's not, this is a very rough rule of thumb, but maybe, the chance that someone would be a match with another person might be, 20-ish% or 20-30% or something like that, regardless of whether they're related. So it's not so much the matching part. And also now they have these things called paired donation, which means that if you have a willing donor, even if you're not a match, you can basically swap with someone else who's in the same situation, another pair who's not a match, and then get a transplant. So the real issue is, I think, awareness and education and people being willing to donate. And I think the reason why you don't see people coming forward as being willing to donate to their friends and family is just because, they're not asked, they're not told about it. They don't understand the process. They think that it's going to be this huge, health harm. It's going to change their life. It's going to, decrease their life expectancy or make them more sick or something like that, when none of those things are true. And I think the person who needs a kidney a lot of the time, they don't want to be a burden. They don't want to ask someone for their organ. I tell people, picture asking a friend or a family member for money, right? And now imagine it's asking for an organ.
Right.
I think that those things, and then also, of course, if you need, and if you need a kidney, you're not a doctor, right? You're not an expert in it, and so it's hard, to bring up that conversation, knowing people are going to ask you things that may, about matching or about risks or about the surgery that maybe you don't know about and don't feel all that comfortable having that conversation.
Well, let's go back. Let's go back about 10 steps, because I think that the best way we can help with this episode is to really break things down into layman's terms where people understand it. Because I when I met Chantal, years ago, and then I have followed her story with her daughter, Talia, because, there's a face to it. There's a person. So now let's stop here. So first of all, who needs a kidney? So if we're talking about kidney donation, like what has to happen for someone to need a kidney?
Yeah. So basically, so kidney failure can be caused by a lot of things. So some people have diabetes, some people have high blood pressure, some people have genetic conditions, and that leads to kidney disease, right? And so there's a lot of people. I think there's 31 million people in the country that have some form of chronic kidney disease, but for some, percentage of those people, that disease becomes kidney failure. So about 500,000 people in the country, their kidneys have failed; they don't work anymore. And the kidneys are the organs that remove waste from your body. So if you have kidney failure and you don't get a transplant, it means you can't pee, you can't go to the bathroom. And so if you have kidney failure. Now, a lot of people, it usually takes maybe 10 years of chronic kidney disease for those kidneys to fail. But a lot of people don't even know that they have chronic kidney disease. So for about, I think, 30 or 40% of people who have kidney failure, the first time they know about it, they have any idea that their kidneys have a problem, are when they're told your kidneys don't work anymore and you need to go on dialysis.
Wow.
So dialysis. Go ahead.
Nope, you're answering my question. Go ahead.
So dialysis is, first, it's an important medical, innovation. Obviously, in the 1960s when it was created, and it allows hundreds of thousands of people in the United States to live. When if that didn't happen, they would die. The way that dialysis works is it takes each week you go in for treatment about 3 or 4 times for about 4 or more hours at a time. Wow. And they take all your blood and they cycle all the blood through a machine that takes out those toxins that usually your kidneys would deal with. And then it goes back into your body. So dialysis is really exhausting. it doesn't let you live a normal life. People who are on dialysis usually can't maintain, full employment. The average, survival, if you think of the 5-year survival of patients on dialysis, it's actually, unfortunately, about the same as patients who have brain cancer. So it's 1 in 3. So, not everyone who is on dialysis is healthy enough to get a transplant, but about 100 to 200,000 people in the country probably are at any one time. So 100,000 are on the waiting list, and there's more who don't make it to the list. And for those people, so that if you can, so you think of dialysis, so your kidneys have failed, you're running your blood through a machine. A kidney transplant basically lets you have a normal, healthy life. You're taking immunosuppressant drugs to suppress your immune system so that they can accept this foreign organ. So that means that you're more susceptible to a cold or to a flu. Those things are more serious. But fundamentally, with a transplant, you have a normal, healthy life. And each transplant lasts, living donor transplant is sort of the best treatment possible. That lasts for about 14 or more years on average. A deceased donor transplant lasts a little bit less, about 9 or 10 years on average.
So when you get an organ donated, it's not like that's it, that for the rest of your life you're good to go.
Right. For most people. I mean, sometimes, organs can last for decades and decades and decades. But yeah, you shouldn't think of it as this person gets a transplant and then there's never going to be any issues that they're ever going to have again. It's, saves decades of life, but not indefinitely.
Right. So now let's flip it to the donor side. So Kim and I walk into, the doctor's office and we say, we're interested in organ donation or kidney donation specifically. Where would we start? What would be, what are they looking for, first of all?
Right. So to be a kidney donor, you need to be healthier, much healthier really than the average person in the population. I mean, especially your kidneys need to be especially healthy, but also, they want to make sure that you don't have high blood pressure. And so what they will end up doing is, if you just, literally that's what I did when I wanted to donate. I had my physical. I told my doctor, hey, I've been researching this for a while. I want to donate. And so she directed me to a transplant center. I went to the transplant center. And there's a whole range of tests they perform to make sure you're healthy enough that if you donate a kidney, you're going to be totally fine afterwards. And so then, you're going to do tests. And those tests will take a few months. And there's a lot of little vials of blood they'll take. So it's, if you're afraid of needles, it's not great. It's a little bit of a reason not to do it. But and then you'll do, I remember they collect 24 hours of your urine. They do an EKG to make sure that it's easy to do the surgery, different things like that.
And so if the person who needed a kidney was not in my local area, I would do all this, with my own doctor, and then the information would be sent to the other?
There's like a database or something, right?
Yeah. So I think different centers handle it differently. Sometimes you'll have to fly out to the actual center for some of the tests. But I think most of the centers, especially the larger and more sophisticated ones, really make an effort to make it as convenient for you as possible. So most of the tests you'll be able to do at home and then just send those results over. And you'll probably still, let's say that, you wanted to donate, at Mount Sinai in New York, to Thalia or whatever, and you live far away, you might go to New York for like one appointment before the surgery, and then they'd schedule the surgery and you'd go the second time. Okay.
And then what is something that, would prevent a person from being a donor?
So if you had a history of cancer, that would be an issue because the person who's getting the organ is going to be immune suppressed. And so that could make it very, very easy for them to get cancer. So that'd be a reason. Or if you had lower than average kidney function, they wouldn't let you donate because they want to make sure that you're going to be healthy. Or if there's a psychiatric evaluation component to it. So if, when you go to that and they say, well, why are you donating? And you say, well, I don't really want to donate, but no one's in my family is going to like me or let me go and come Thanksgiving. That would be an issue. those are some of the other reasons that people might not be able to donate.
And what are some myths around being a living donor, like fears that people would have or misconceptions about what the process involves? Am I in danger of my life being, at risk? Like if I became can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah. Well, so one little thing I'll start with is kind of interesting is, you sort of assume that if you donate, maybe my chance of kidney stones will go up, or maybe if I had kidney stones before, I'll be worse. And it's interesting. That's not true at all. It doesn't change at all. I think people, firstly, people with any surgery, they worry, well, how dangerous is this surgery? What's the chance of dying during surgery? And for kidney donation, that's 3 in 10,000. So if you donated every day for a year, you'd still be less than a 10% chance that anything would happen to you. And the other thing I think is people worry, well, if I donate, is my life gonna change, right? Am I going to be less vibrant? Am I going to have less energy, or am I going to, my kidney's going to fail sooner? And there again, the vast majority of people who donate, their lives are really basically unaffected by donation. Like I feel the same now as I did 4 years ago when I donated. And that's true for most people. And sort of the risks are that so there is an increased risk of kidney failure. And basically, but I think people think, hearing, okay, I'm giving 1 of 2 kidneys, they probably think, well, my increased risk of kidney failure is if my chances were, 5% before, they're 50% now or something like that. And that's not true at all. The way it works is if you're an average American, your chance of getting kidney failure in your life is about 3 in 100. It's 3%. If you donate your kidney, your risk of getting kidney failure is probably 1 or 2% because you were healthier to start with and you remain healthier after you donate. If you were healthy enough to donate and you didn't donate, your chance would be about 1 in 200, right? So it increases your risk, but it's not an enormous amount.
Right.
And the other little, so another thing people worry about is, well, can I get pregnant after I've donated, or is it going to make it more difficult to become pregnant or anything like that? And there again, it doesn't, many women donate and then have children after, and they don't have, it shouldn't create any sort of issue with getting pregnant or having a child. The only thing it can do in that regard is, there's a condition called preeclampsia, sort of high blood pressure during pregnancy, a kind of complicated pregnancy. And that, so for everyone, the average for that is about 6%, 6 in 100. And if you donate a kidney, it would be about 12%. And so that's a real consideration. But again, it's not, a disaster or really scary or anything like that.
Right. What kind of, is there any genetic testing? So I've talked about this in the past. I have a BRCA mutation, which gives me an increased chance of certain cancers. And, if I were going through this process, would that come into consideration? Is there other genetic considerations?
Yeah, so I think there's some things that are genetic about your chance of getting kidney disease or kidney failure. So there's something called the APOL1 gene that some African Americans have that increases your risk of kidney disease or kidney failure. And I think a lot of times they do testing for that, especially in affected populations, to make sure that you're not at sort of special risk. And that's a sort of active issue because that's a fairly recent kind of discovery. So that's like an active issue in the medical field. But then there's a lot of things, donating a kidney shouldn't change kind of your base rate of an illness or anything like that. So it's not like they would test for the BRCA gene just because it wouldn't affect you either way. Right. The only thing that would is like if you had breast cancer, then you probably wouldn't be eligible to donate because they wouldn't want any sort of cancerous cell going over to the patient who might be, who's immunocompromised, whose immune system isn't working as well.
That makes sense. So what about weight? So we talk about, people who are healthy. And so I was reading a little bit that, people who are obese wouldn't necessarily be an ideal donor. Is that for their safety or for the organ itself, or how does that?
That's for their safety. Although it's interesting. So definitely having high blood pressure or history of high blood pressure, that's a real risk factor, right? And that's a sort of good reason not to donate. So for example, they don't tend to let people with high blood pressure donate, but I mentioned that the statistics about death during surgery, and if it turns out very few people with high blood pressure donate, but if they do donate, their risk of death is 30 in 10,000, and everyone else's risk is 1 in 10,000. So that's something that can matter. But that said, it actually turns, and a lot of centers, and centers do tend to have sort of a cutoff for kind of obesity issues or anything like that. And I think that tends to be, I'm not quite familiar with the BMI scale, but I think it's something like 35, if I recall, tends to be a cutoff that centers
So you don't
use.
need to be a marathon runner. You can be,
not at all.
Average size and
Yep. And it actually turns out, they just did a really, the New England Journal of Medicine published a really in-depth study that tried to look at, well, what are all the different things that might increase someone's risk of kidney failure? And let's kind of isolate each of the factors, and that'll help us select donors in a safer way. And it turns out that obesity doesn't really, even people that we might sort of think would have, are significantly obese, it doesn't seem to really create extra risk when you adjust when it's not combined with hypertension, high blood pressure,
right,
or things like that, or diabetes.
Okay, I have a really weird question. I know that we're specifically talking about kidney, but are there any other parts that we don't need that?
Yeah, and I also
besides blood,
nobody ever does an appendix.
But besides blood and tissue, are there any other organs that we don't need?
Well, there's
that
also the liver donation, right? Because it regenerates. Right. So do you know a lot about that too?
I know some about that. So I know more about kidneys, know a little bit about livers, then a little bit about bone marrow. So for liver donation, so basically in terms of the need, the reason we've been talking about kidneys so far is 5 out of 6 people who need a transplant need a kidney. So when you think of the organ transplant crisis in this country, that's mostly kidneys. And so then the second most commonly needed organ is the liver. And I think there's about, it's about 5 to 10,000 people in the country who need a liver. And, livers are also, like kidneys, something that you can get from both a living and a deceased donor, unlike, sort of a heart, which clearly you can't get from a living donor. For a liver, it's the surgery is more complicated from the donor's point of view, because, instead of just taking out an entire organ, you're basically, you're taking a lobe or a piece of the liver. So you're kind of cutting into the liver and taking out a piece, and the liver will grow back. But it basically means that the surgery is much more significant. The kidney surgery is performed laparoscopically. So if you have a desk job, most people are back to work within 2 or 3 weeks. The hospital stay is a couple of nights. I was off, sort of prescription painkillers after about 5 to 7 days. But a liver is much more serious. You're out of work for a lot longer. The risks and risk complications are a lot higher. That said, the flip side of it is that, with a kidney donation, your remaining kidney grows, so you end up having not 50% of the function you had before, but more like 70%. But there's still some difference, right, over the course of your life. Whereas with the liver, it should, basically should kind of all grow back. And theoretically, there shouldn't be any long-term consequences besides kind of the surgery itself.
Huh. That's interesting.
I feel like I just had anatomy class.
And then bone marrow is a totally different, because do you find, first of all, that all donors, that they tend to come forward more often when they know who they want to donate to? Absolutely. I mean, about 97% of living donors in the United States donate to friends and family. And in England, for example, that's more like 90%, so maybe 1 in 10 are donating to strangers. But yeah, I mean, kidney donation is a serious surgery, and most people who do it are going to want to do it. They do it because they know someone in their life who they deeply care about, who needs a transplant. And so that's always going to be sort of most of people donating, which is
And so a lot of what we want to do is to try to make it easier for patients to ask those people to donate and easier for those people to give.
Right. And you talk about legislation and you doing some like politics. What are you trying to get past? Like, what are the hurdles right now?
Yeah. So basically, the framework is kind of what I said before about making it easy to ask and easy to give. So you can think of kind of both sides of that. And basically that means sort of education for the patient and their family and support for the donor, treating the donor with respect and like sort of an honored public servant. So from the education side of things, right now there's kind of two problems. One is if you have kidney failure and are healthy enough to get a transplant, the only education you're required to ever receive is just the dialysis company, the dialysis provider telling you, hey, you can get a transplant. But of course, that's a company that loses, they're not specialists in transplant, and they lose money whenever someone gets a transplant. So maybe they don't do the greatest job of educating you. So
because they take them off the dialysis.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So we as a country do a better job of reaching all people who need a transplant and not just people who are sort of medically savvy enough to kind of go after a transplant and to get on the waiting list. And the second piece is, so once you're on the waiting list, we don't do a great job about educating about living donors. So what we do right now, most centers will have you come in for like a lecture that they'll do, on a weekend or something like that. And they'll say, well, here are some ideas for how to find a living donor. You should do that. It's great. It's a great treatment. Good luck. Oh. Right. And that doesn't really give you what you need. Right. So instead, there's been these studies that show that methods that kind of bring in people's support network and help educate those people work a lot better and get a lot more people transplants. So my favorite is home visits. So it's let's have an educator come to your home, they get your friends and family, and they educate the whole group and answer everyone's questions about transplant. So that's one of the things we want to get done. Mm-hmm. And the second thing is supporting the donor and treating donors with respect. And so basically what I want to see is sort of a GI Bill for kidney donation. People talk about this question about, incentives or should we buy kidneys or things like that. And, I really see the arguments on both sides because the problem is just so huge. Mm-hmm. But I think that we could really end the shortage if we just said, okay, let's treat donors like we treat, other public servants like teachers or nurses or members of our armed services and give donors, lifetime health insurance and a stipend each year to do their follow-up, and remove the disincentives to donation, like paying their lost wages and things like that. Mm-hmm. So I think those are kind of the two big things we're pushing that are sort of longer term, and then there's sort of shorter term sort of pieces of that we're doing, like sort of New York legislation we're working on now, or legislation in Maine, or there's a federal campaign we're doing too.
Right. So I was reading an article in the New York Times that you are in, and you talk about how when somebody asks, and please correct me if I'm getting this wrong, but say I need a kidney, and if I go and I ask him, or there's some support behind me, and they ask him, that it's ultimately going to be more successful if my support system is looking for a kidney for me as opposed to myself. Am I getting that right?
Yeah. I think it's basically that, it's a very hard conversation. If I need a kidney and I have kidney failure, it's very difficult for me to kind of do all the work myself and be going around to everyone and saying, here's what kidney disease is, here's what kidney donation is, right? Because, one, there's just a lot of people to talk to, but two, it feels like you're sort of self-advertising in this kind of difficult way.
Right.
Whereas, if my spouse or my sister or my daughter or my mother or my friend is talking to my friends and family and saying, hey, did you know that Josh needs a kidney? And, it'd be great to get a transplant. And, I thought of donating, but I wasn't a match, or I wasn't eligible, or, surgery's too scary for me, but I know it's not that big of a surgery or whatever. Those sort of champions can be really helpful and really critical.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it makes sense because I think that's in any people just respond more when you're trying to help another person.
Well, the whole process of helping and asking, there's a sense of loyalty and dedication when you're helping another. Even if you can't give a kidney, if you're helping that person connect with someone that can, I mean, that's, there's something empowering in that process also.
Yeah.
Right.
Go ahead.
And that's what I was going to say is that, no one is ever obligated to give anyone a kidney, for any reason. But it's something I think that we can all support. We can all be a part of the solution. Living donation is not necessarily the right choice it's certainly not the right choice for everybody. And it's probably not even the right choice for most people. But I think what would be a great change and would be really important is if everyone kind of supported living donation by sharing these stories and by, sort of raising awareness and raising knowledge, because it might not be for you, but really if only 1 in 10,000 Americans each year donated a kidney, there wouldn't be a shortage at all, which would be really, just one of the major public health achievements of the 21st century.
Right. I think one of the questions, though, as far as the risks go, a person would say, or okay, I've given a kidney. Now, what happens later in 20 years if if my other kidney isn't working and I need a kidney?
Right. And so the first thing is that you get priority on the waiting list if you're a living donor. So most living donors who go on the waiting list get a kidney within about, I think, 3 to 6 months. So it's very different if you're a donor and end up needing a kidney than if you haven't donated. So I think that's the biggest thing. And of course, I mean, just in terms of absolute numbers, there's been, I think, 200,000 people who've been living donors in the last 25 years or so. And the number who've needed a kidney is, a couple hundred or something like that.
Wow. So what can we do to get the message out? Like what can people do if somebody's interested in being a living donor? What can they do?
What are first steps?
Yeah, well, so if you're interested in being a living donor, I'd say there's two options. One option is, we at Weight with Zero support donation. We're always happy to talk to anyone who's thinking of donating. Even if you don't, it's fine if it's just something you think about and you don't end up donating anything like that. We really love to talk to people about it and help them kind of personally guide them through the process and answer any questions that they have. And so that you can always just go to our website, which is weightwithzero.org. Or you can email us at info@weightwithzero.org. And just if you ever have any kind of questions about that or are interested there. You also, of course, can just go directly to a transplant center in your area, and they will also kind of help you with the process. And they'll kind of help you get started.
And what is the timeline kind of between, okay, I'm interested and the surgery and donating the organ?
Well, so some of it is definitely driven by the donor, right? So you can say, I want to donate. You can say I'm interested, but I need to learn more, and I want it to be kind of a slow, restrained process, right? Or when I donated, I went to the transplant center, I think in April or May, and I knew that for various reasons it made sense for me to donate in December, and I told them that, and they accommodated that. But I think for a lot of people, people's lives change, and so you want to donate relatively, quickly. You realize you want to do it. It fits your decision now. You feel sure of it, and so you want to do it. And then I think that unfortunately, it can really kind of vary from center to center. But I think generally you should expect to be able to donate if you're giving to a stranger within about maybe 3 to 6 months. Of coming forward, and it's probably a little bit quicker if you're giving to someone that you know. And the other piece is just that different centers, do it differently, and different centers are sort of make it easier for the donor to donate, or some centers maybe are not as good about that. And I'm a New Yorker, so I like some of the New York City centers, but that's also something that we can sort of send out information about what are centers that do a really exemplary job sort of helping you through the process.
If you're donating to a stranger, do you get the option to meet the recipient of your kidney?
Yeah, so it's basically like the thing where you kind of both have to turn your keys, right? So you both have to agree to meet in order to meet your recipient. And I think most people, especially most recipients, do, because of course they feel really grateful. for the donation. And so I met my recipient, John. I actually just talked to him yesterday, but I met him a few months after I donated. And though it was, absolutely incredible. It was in the transplant center. His mom was there too. And just hearing his story, he had been, before his getting kidney failure, he had been like a club promoter and a semi-pro athlete. So he was a really charming, eloquent, charismatic guy. And he was really able to tell his story, which was really a heartbreaking story. He had gotten kidney failure, I think, when he was 39. It came completely out of the blue. He had this really active lifestyle that completely changed. And he was on dialysis for about 8 years. The person he had been living with, it was too much of a strain on the relationship. They broke up about 4 years into him being on dialysis. And it also just really made him sort of, I guess, agoraphobic. Like he started kind of not really leaving the house and everything. And there was all these other kind of health impacts that dialysis had that even it took a couple of years after the transplant surgery till he was sort of fully back to normal, just given all the different things that happened from dialysis. But he was just sort of so happy and just so full of joy at having been given this new lease on life. And I just felt felt so great being part of that process. And we became, quite close for a while. We're both big football fans. We're both from Boston, but somehow he became a Peyton Manning fan. So we always text each other in football season, and he had the better of it.
I was waiting for you to say that you're now a Jets fan or something, and I was going to have to hang up. I'm sorry.
God, no. Well, no, I'm a Patriots fan.
Okay.
True.
We're good then, Josh. We're good.
All right.
Yeah. So I think say somebody says, okay, I'm going to do this, and let's use Thalia as an example here. So they move forward. I mean, first of all, you must be getting a lot of medical information about yourself that you didn't necessarily know, which is a benefit, right? I mean,
you as the donor,
one as a donor, because, you're going through this process. They want to make sure that but what are some of the reasons, other than like the high blood pressure or, because that's the stuff they kind of figure out in the beginning. Is there throughout this process, other factors that they would then say, okay, you're not necessarily good to be a donor?
That's a good question. So what, there's kind of, so towards later on, so earlier on in the process, at the beginning of it, the way you're going to get screened out is they're going to ask you a whole bunch of questions about your medical history, right? And at that point, it's like, like I said, so that cancer is just the one that always comes to mind because I just know that the most. But so then they might say, okay, well, you have high blood pressure, or your family has a history of kidney disease, or you had cancer, so you're screened out. Then they do like laboratory tests, right, where they might find out, well, you didn't know that you had high blood pressure, but you do, and that's an issue. Okay. And you're absolutely right that people, that's definitely something I've seen multiple times of people I've known who have decided they wanted to donate. They do the testing and they find out something about their own health, which unfortunately doesn't let them donate. But also means that they now are able to treat this condition that they didn't know they had in the first place.
Right.
And that can be really important. And no one really has quantified, well, how much does that matter, or how important is it, or how does it compare to the risks of donation? But that definitely is something that happens. I mean, I know that someone who wanted to donate to Thalia found out, something about her own health, that she was now getting treated, and it really sort of a lifesaver, which is important.
Right, it's amazing.
Yeah, and then but then later in it's like you get the blood tests and stuff. Towards the end of the process, that's when they do, or later in the process, they do the things that are testing your kidney function specifically. So like the 24-hour urine test, things like that. So that can be a place where, your kidney function isn't as great as we had hoped. You can't donate. And then I think the sort of the later stages are when they do like the like imaging, the X-rays and the EKG and things like that. And that, I think that's the other place maybe they could find that there would be an issue. Right. I think those are kind of the different stages. Oh, and of course the relatively early on, the blood matching and just seeing like, okay, are you a match for this person or not? And if not, hopefully you'll be able to be part of a paired kidney exchange. So you can still donate and get the person to get a transplant. Right.
You just donate to somebody else. I mean, I think that's great. I think this is, I could talk to you all day, about this. I think it's a really important topic, but also, one that's really misunderstood. And it's a lot more, it's not easy, but it's a lot more simple, I think, than people understand as far as like, these are the steps, Right. So if we kind of walk them through it, hopefully we can get some more awareness and get the word out there.
No, I agree.
So thank you so much, Josh Morrison, founder and co-founder and executive director of Weightless Zero. We really appreciate your time.
Thank you so much, Josh.
Okay, have a great day.
Right. You too.
What does being a broad mean to you?
A broad tells it like it is.
Doesn't take no for an answer.
She exudes confidence.
A warrior princess of the urban jungle.
Being a broad is being diverse.
Strong enough to do things on your own, but smart enough to know when to ask for help.
We succeed. We get right to the top.
Being a broad is 10% of what happens to you and 90% how you deal with it.
Broadscast, where every broad's voice matters.
Welcome back. So that was a long show. We went over, but
you know what? Sometimes you have to in order to get the story out and to make it seem. I learned so much. I feel like I need to go do something. I mean, that's what I love.
Yes,
I feel inspired.
Yes, and that's awesome. I love that. That's the perfect word. That's the perfect way to put it. Do something.
Let's do it.
So first of all, head over to broadscast.com and get all the information there, all the links. You can find Josh. You can find Weightless Zero. You can find
Chantal
and Kidney for Thalia on Facebook and all of it. So we really appreciate your listening, and we will talk to you next week. Have a good week, everyone.
See you later.